I want to start today with a paradox. It's one of those
Mm,
things that, I don't know, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
right.
And frankly, it keeps a lot of very smart, very wealthy people awake at night.
It's the billion-dollar question. I mean, quite literally.
Imagine you have a massive problem, let's say rural poverty in a developing nation. You have the resources. I mean, we are talking billions of dollars.
Billions in aid, grants, investments.
You have the experts, the absolute best scientists, agronomists, economists the world has to offer,
Mhm.
and you have the will. Everyone involved, from the donors in Geneva to the farmers in the field, is desperate for this to succeed.
So on paper, you have every single ingredient you need for success.
Exactly. So you pour all that energy into the system, you mobilize fleets of trucks, you distribute high-tech seeds, you run the training camps, and you see a spike, a massive spike in progress.
Hmm.
Yields go up, incomes rise, kids start going to better schools,
Yeah.
everyone pops the champagne,
Right.
and then the funding cycle ends, the 5-year grant runs out, the external checkbook closes, and almost immediately, I mean, sometimes in the span of a single season, everything just evaporates.
It's what Dr. Nimrod Israeli calls phantom progress. You look back 5 or 10 years later, and it's like the whole intervention never happened.
Wow.
And in some really heartbreaking cases, the communities are actually worse off than they were before the help arrived because they've lost their traditional resilience.
That is the mystery we're tackling today. We're doing a deep dive into a fascinating and honestly a kind of mind-bending analysis by Dr. Nimrod Israeli titled Why Massive Efforts to Help Communities So Often Don't Last.
And a fair warning to everyone listening. This deep dive is going to take a turn you probably aren't expecting. We are going to start with agriculture and economics, sure.
Right.
But to understand why these good intentions fail, we actually have to talk about physics.
Physics. Wait, I thought we were talking about farming and foreign aid.
We are, but it turns out the reason we keep failing is that we are trying to solve a structural problem with an interaction-based mindset.
Okay.
And the only way to really get your head around that is to look at how the universe handles gravity.
Okay. You've got me hooked, but I'm also a little intimidated.
Huh.
I mean, I barely scraped by in high school physics.
Now, don't worry, there's no math. But there's a completely new way of looking at why things stick and why they fall apart.
All right, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the mission for today is to move from that frustration of just doing more to the clarity of designing better.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get to the physics of it all, we need to look at the scene of the crime, so to speak. The source material zeroes in on a specific organization called AGRA.
Right, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. And Dr. Israeli uses this as his primary case study, not because it's a failure in the traditional sense, but because it is, by all standard metrics, the perfect effort.
Perfect in what sense?
Yeah.
Like they did everything right according to the textbooks.
Exactly. AGRA isn't some small, underfunded college project. It has been active since 2006. It operates in over 20 countries. We are talking about tens of millions of farmers.
This is a juggernaut.
It is.
Ugh.
Supported by governments and the biggest private foundations on the planet.
So they aren't just, handing out cash and hoping for the best.
No, far from it. They're mobilizing advanced technology, agronomic knowledge, inputs like fertilizers and drought-resistant seeds, and crucially, market access. On paper, it looks flawless.
A massive injection of capability.
Right, into a region that desperately needs it.
But I sense a but coming.
There is. Dr. Israeli points out a deep and persistent frustration surrounding it. Because when you look at the data over 2 decades, the gains rarely endure once that external support fades.
Mm-hmm.
He highlights this really jarring reality. If you compare farmers who were in these programs to those who weren't, sometimes their long-term condition is identical.
It is devastating. To think of all that effort, all that hope, just washing away.
It is.
So, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Is Dr. Israeli saying the people involved are incompetent? Is this a case of corruption or, bad seeds, lazy management?
No, and that is the most crucial disclaimer in the entire paper. If we blame incompetence, we miss the point.
Okay.
This is not a failure of talent. It's not a failure of sincerity. The professionals involved are committed. The technology actually works. The seeds really do grow better. The fertilizer really does increase yields.
So if the parts work and the people are smart and the money is there, why does the machine break down the moment you stop hand cranking it.
because of what he calls the structural gap.
Structural gap. Okay, that sounds like an engineering term.
And it fits perfectly. Think of it this way. Change happens at two distinct levels. First, there's the individual level.
Right.
The farmer learns a new technique. They get a better bag of seeds. That's great. Their personal capability has gone up.
Okay, I follow that. I learn a skill, I get a tool, I am better at my job.
Right. But then there's the system level, the broader social, economic, and institutional structures that surround that farmer.
The environment they operate in.
Exactly. Markets, credit systems, supply chains, insurance, all of that. And in these massive aid programs, Dr. Israeli argues, we see huge change at the individual level. We train the farmer. But the system level, that remains largely unchanged.
So we're just pumping in artificial support.
Yes. Subsidies, coordination, logistics, all things which mimic a healthy system.
It's like life support.
It is. So as long as that external energy is being pumped in, the individual creates value, the farmer produces more. But the moment you unplug that energy,
The system just snaps back.
it reverts to the baseline that the underlying structure can actually sustain. You see,
Yeah.
you cannot maintain a level of output that the structure itself doesn't support. It's a physical impossibility.
He gives a really poignant example of this with students, right? I think that
Yeah.
really helps visualize the human cost of this gap.
Yes, and this is a story that plays out every single year. He talks about African students who go to Israel, which is a powerhouse in agriculture, to study. They spend time in this high-tech, highly structured environment. They get a world-class education. They're highly motivated.
So their individual capability is sky high. They know exactly how to, I don't know, grow tomatoes in a desert.
Exactly. They return home with all this advanced knowledge, but then they struggle to create lasting change. And it's not because they forgot what they learned. It's not because they aren't smart or hardworking.
It's because when they get home, the cooperative isn't there. The bank that loans against the harvest isn't there. The refrigerated truck isn't there.
The structure defeats the capability, the interaction that the education clashed with an incompatible structure, and structure wins every time.
So we have this diagnosis. The structure is broken. But this is where the source material takes that hard pivot we promised at the top.
Right.
Dr. Israeli says if we want to truly understand why this keeps happening, we need to stop thinking like economists and start thinking like physicists.
Which is a bold move.
It really is. Why on earth does he bring physics into a discussion about poverty?
Because physics is honest. It's a domain that's free of politics or ideology or, wishful thinking. Physics doesn't care if you mean well. It only cares about motion and persistence.
Okay.
And he uses physics to explain the difference between two concepts that we usually confuse, interaction and gravity.
All right, let's break those down. When he says interaction, what are we talking about?
Interaction is the intuitive way we see the world. It's essentially Newtonian physics. Cause and effect. A pushes B, you apply a force, you get movement.
I kick a ball, the ball moves. I push a car, the car rolls. Simple.
Exactly. And in the development world, and honestly in most corporate management too, this is our default mode. We see a problem, which is usually a lack of motion, and we apply a force.
We send money.
We send trainers, we send seeds, we interact with the system.
And it feels like it works.
Yeah.
The ball moves, the graph goes up.
It does work, locally and temporarily. Interaction is great for generating motion. But here is the flaw, and this is the subtle trap. Interaction assumes that once the object is moving, the system will allow it to keep moving. It doesn't explain why things stop.
We just assume momentum will take over.
Right. But in the real world, friction and gravity exist. And that brings us to the second concept.
Gravity. Now, I know gravity pulls things down, but Dr. Israeli describes it differently.
He does. And this is where we need to put on our Einstein hats for just a second.
Hmm.
In modern physics, gravity isn't just another force or interaction like a push or a pull. It's something much more fundamental.
Okay.
Gravity describes the geometry of the space itself.
The geometry. Okay, help me visualize that.
Think of a heavy bowling ball sitting in the middle of a trampoline. It curves the fabric downwards.
Right, it creates a dip.
That dip. That isn't a force pushing things. That is the shape of the arena. So if you roll a marble nearby, it falls toward the bowling ball, not because some ghost hand pushed it, but because the road it's traveling on is curved.
So gravity represents the structure in which the motion happens.
Exactly. And so, to go back to the car analogy, interaction is me pushing the car. Structure is whether the road is flat, uphill, or downhill.
Precisely. And here is Dr. Israeli's aha moment. We have been using interaction-based solutions to solve a structural problem. We are pushing the car uphill against the gravity of the local economy, applying massive effort. And we assume that if we just push hard enough or for long enough, the car will just stay there.
But the moment we stop pushing,
Gravity takes over. It rolls right back down. Not because the car is broken, not because the person pushing was lazy, but because the hill is still a hill.
because the geometry of the system hasn't changed.
Exactly. You cannot force persistence through interaction alone. Interaction generates motion. Structure generates persistence.
Wow, that is such a powerful distinction. Structure generates persistence. It makes me think about how often we try to force a habit or a change in our own lives just by trying harder. That's interaction, without changing the environment we're in, the structure.
It applies to everything. If you want to change the outcome, you have to change the geometry of the space.
Okay, but changing the geometry sounds abstract. How do you change the geometry of an economy? This is where Dr. Israeli pivots to history, and I think these examples are crucial because they prove this isn't just theory.
Right. If interaction is doing, then structure is designing.
And history is full of moments where a structural redesign changed everything.
The first example he drops is the limited liability company, the LLC. Now, most of us just think of that as, boring paperwork you file so you can open a bank account.
I know, it sounds incredibly dry. But the invention of the LLC was a revolutionary structural change. Think about the world before it. Business was entirely personal. Meaning, if you owned a bakery and it burned down, or a ship and it sank, you were ruined. Not just the business, you.
Your personal assets, your house.
Your family savings, everything could be seized to pay the debts.
So the risk was infinite.
Infinite. And because the risk was infinite, people played it safe. Businesses stayed small. They usually died when the owner died. The gravity of the economy was set to keep it small, keep it safe.
So the LLC comes along.
And it changes the structure, creates a legal barrier, an invisible wall between the person and the entity. If the company fails, the company dies, but you don't starve.
It put a cap on the risk.
Exactly. The shift to the LLC wasn't about inventing a new machine or people suddenly getting smarter. It was a change in the legal structure. It aligned risk, responsibility, and continuity in a completely new way.
And suddenly, economic activity could persist and scale beyond the lifespan of a single person. The structure held the complexity.
Exactly. The geometry of the business world changed, so the motion of the economy changed forever. You didn't need to force people to take risks. The structure invited it.
The second example is even more direct with agriculture, and it's a fascinating comparison. He compares the traditional village to the kibbutz in early 20th century Israel.
This is a fantastic controlled experiment. Imagine two settlements. You have the same geography, often the exact same soil and climate.
Same difficult conditions.
Malaria, swamps, heat. You have the same market access, and often you have the same level of agronomic knowledge.
So the interactions, the inputs, the people, the challenges were roughly the same.
But the structure was radically different. The traditional village was individualistic. It lacked that internal alignment of shared direction and shared risk. If one farmer failed, he failed alone.
Which, in a harsh environment, means you probably fail often.
Right. But the kibbutz was designed structurally to align work and shared destiny. It was a cooperative structure where risk was absorbed by the whole. If I get sick, you harvest my field, because my harvest is also your harvest.
It sounds like simple cooperation, but he's arguing it's a structural technology.
Right. It is. The result was resilience. The kibbutz structure allowed those communities to absorb hardship, weather bad harvests, and sustain collective effort over decades.
Wow.
The villages without that structural alignment often saw progress reverse or remain incredibly fragile.
So it goes right back to that idea of the African student we discussed earlier. You can have the capability, the knowledge of how to farm, but if you don't have the structure of how to organize and sustain that farming,
the capability just dissipates. It dissipates into what physicists would call equilibrium. And this brings us to the philosophical core of Dr. Israeli's argument. He calls it the universal law of increasing complexity.
that sounds intense. Is this a real physics law, or is he getting philosophical on us?
It's a bit of both,
Yeah.
rooted in thermodynamics. It sounds complex, but the concept is really beautiful. It basically says, energy creates complexity only when it is contained by structure and oriented by direction.
Contained by structure. Okay, I think I need a metaphor here.
Okay, think of the Industrial Revolution. Think of a steam engine. What's the fuel?
Coal. Fire.
Right. Now, if you just take a pile of coal and burn it in an open field, what happens?
When you get a big fire, lots of heat, lots of smoke, maybe roast some marshmallows,
Yeah.
and then ash.
Right. The energy dissipates, it reaches equilibrium with the air, and it's gone. That is energy without structure.
Mm.
But if you burn that same coal inside a boiler with pistons, valves, and a crankshaft,
That is the structure.
the structure constrains the energy. It traps it. It creates internal tension. It doesn't let the heat just float away. It forces it to push a piston. It converts raw energy into functional work.
So to bring this back to the billions of dollars spent on aid,
Yeah.
pouring money into a region without changing the social or economic engine.
Is like burning coal in an open pile. You get a lot of heat and light for a moment, everyone gets excited, the stats go up, and then the fuel runs out and it goes cold.
This is really challenging the whole notion of just trying harder. We love to praise effort. We love the heroic struggle. But this suggests that struggle without structure is just waste.
It tells us that we need to shift from doing more to designing better. We have to stop assuming that persistence just happens automatically. Persistence is an architectural condition. It must be designed before the interactions begin.
I want to circle back to something you said earlier about the interaction-based explanation being so seductive to us. Why do we keep falling for it? Why do smart people, leaders of nations, CEOs, keep thinking that one more grant, one more training session will be the thing that sticks?
Because it works in the short term. And frankly, it feels good. Humans are wired for cause and effect. I do, X, Y happens. It's tangible.
Right.
I can take a picture of the truck delivering the seeds.
But you can't take a picture of a risk-sharing agreement.
Exactly. Structure is invisible. You can't see gravity. You only see the apple fall. You can't see the legal structure of a corporation. You only see the busy workers.
So we focus on the workers and the apples, and we ignore the laws and the gravity.
Precisely. Dr. Israeli argues that physics has been so successful as a science because it learned to separate these things. It explains local motion with interaction, but it uses structured geometry to explain the big picture constraints.
And we need to do the same in human systems.
We need to have the humility to admit that our interaction tools, money, training, technology, are powerless to create persistence on their own.
That is a tough pill to swallow for an industry built on projects. Projects have start dates and end dates. Structures usually don't.
And that's the friction. A project is an interaction. A structure is a reality. If you want to change reality, you can't just run a project. You have to redesign the arena.
So let's make this personal for a minute. If I'm listening to this and I'm not running a billion-dollar NGO, maybe I'm just managing a team or running a small business or even just trying to manage my household. What does this mean for me?
It means you should audit your struggles. If you find yourself repeatedly pushing a boulder up a hill, solving the same problem over and over again, stop pushing. Stop interacting. Step back and look at the geometry of the hill.
Ask yourself, is the structure designed to hold the change I'm trying to make?
Exactly. If you're trying to change your team's culture, don't just hold a seminar. That's an interaction. It fades by Tuesday.
Right.
Change the incentive structure or the meeting cadence. That's structure.
If you're trying to save money, don't just use willpower. That's interaction.
Right. Willpower is just mental fuel. It runs out. Set up an automatic transfer so the money never even hits your checking account. That's structure. The money moves because the pipe is built that way, not because you decided to move it every month.
Structure determines persistence.
Effort matters. We aren't saying don't try, but effort without structure is just heat. Effort within structure is an engine.
It's a shift from being a mechanic, always fixing things as they break, to being an architect.
That's the perfect analogy. The mechanic keeps the car moving. The architect designs the road so the car goes where it needs to go without constant steering.
Dr. Israeli's paper really ends on this note of hope, which is surprising. It starts with frustration, all that wasted money, but it ends with a roadmap.
It is hopeful because it says failure isn't inevitable. It's not that humans are incapable of progress. It's not that poverty is unsolvable. It's just that we've been using the wrong tool for the job of persistence. Once we recognize that persistence is an architectural problem, we can solve it.
We just have to be willing to look past the excitement of the interaction, the ribbon cutting, the check signing, and do the boring, invisible work of structural design.
The boring work that makes the exciting work last.
I think that's a fantastic place to land. We've gone from the fields of Africa to the laws of physics and back to our own daily lives.
It's been quite a journey.
So here's our final thought for you to mull over today. In your own life or work, where are you just adding more interaction, working harder, sending more emails, buying more tools, and hoping it sticks? And where could you stop pushing and instead design a structure that holds the change even when you step away?
Because remember, effort matters, but structure determines if it lasts.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.